YouTube, today we're going to go over the Rayquaza Meowstic Blastoise team that I used for Baek battles. Let's get started and roll the episode. So why Rayquaza? Rayquaza is an interesting Pokemon. I think it always has a lot of potential, especially in these weather formats where sun is very common. Airlock being able to shut it down and really just make those weather teams struggle. And I think Rayquaza is a fantastic Pokemon. However, it does have quite a few weaknesses. The 4 times weak to ice is pretty bad, as well as the Zacian being one of the most common restrictions in the format makes Rayquaza a little bit hard to use. It's also not exactly the bulkiest for restricted Pokemon. It is a bit more of a glass cannon, doesn't have the best speed in the world, so there are quite a few weaknesses of Rayquaza. However, I think it is a fantastic Pokemon and I think it had a lot of potential, so I really want to try out Rayquaza and see how it went in this format with a different style compared to what I used in Series 8. So how was the team formed? Well, it started off with a team that had Blastoise and Kyurem White that I was testing with a friend. It was Blastoise, Kyurem White, Incineroar, and the Grimmsnarl core. And I really did enjoy it because Kyurem White was fantastic against a lot of the weather Pokemon. Blastoise was able to help out dealing with these Zacian teams, which Kyurem did struggle against. And I felt like, maybe I could try out Rayquaza on this team because it kind of provides a bit of a similar role to the Kyurem. There are a few differences, of course, but I felt like, I think it could be a really good pairing. So I ended up trying out the Rayquaza, Blastoise, Incineroar, and Grimmsnarl as the core for the team. Then the next thing I did was add a Pokemon, Ferrothorn. So I wanted a grass type. I needed a steel type, I felt like, in general on the team. I just really felt like those types were really important. Steel type, of course, for the fairy types, that could be annoying. Even though Xerneas is pretty rare, I still think it should be an option to be considered. And I really think the grass typing is really crucial because I don't exactly have the best ways to deal with bulky waters. So I felt like, Ferrothorn's really nice, and I loved offensive Ferrothorn back in the early series, like Series 4 and Series 5 and Series 3. I really liked offensive Ferrothorn. So I felt like, why isn't this Pokemon used as much? I mean, there is the Iron Defense, the leftover set, but I feel like Ferrothorn has just pretty good typing. So I want to try out the offensive Ferrothorn once again. And yeah, I just wanted to bring it, so I added it to the team. The next thing I considered was the fact that Grimmsnarl, when I was playing with the core, I just felt like in general, Grimmsnarl was either always getting sacked just to get Reflect Up against Zacians most of the time, or I was forced to bring in Incineroar like every single time that I tried to get Reflect Up, or I had to switch out to Grimmsnarl immediately into Incineroar. And it would just really screw up some of the momentum that I would really like to just get the screen up immediately or like slow it down. So I felt like in general, that was really frustrating for me to play. And then when I thought about it, I was like, do I really need Grimmsnarl? I have 2 dark types with it, which isn't a bad overtype because the fact that I have a dark move on Incineroar and no dark move on the Grimmsnarl, it's not that bad. But I was really getting frustrated about like all the Zacian pivotings with the fake out and then always threatened by Behemoth Blade, always being forced to switch out and not getting my screen up immediately. So I was really getting frustrated by that, and I'm like, you know what, let me look at some of this once again. So I looked at Meowstic because I've been considering this Pokemon for a while. Because like, it has a very similar role to Grimmsnarl. Its bulk is very, very similar. And I wasn't clicking Spirit Break much on the Grimmsnarl. I feel like Darker Shifu is a Pokemon that you would really like make that argument for, but I feel like it's a Pokemon that's been really dropping usage recently. It's, I think, a lot more rare than it used to be early on. So I felt like, you know what? I think Meowstic has a good role here. There were also a few moves that I really want to try out with the Meowstic that it provided. Like it gets Rain Dance, access to Quick Guard. The Psychic coverage is not that bad either. So I felt like, you know what? I'm going to try out Meowstic and see how it worked on the team. So I ended up adding Meowstic and replacing the Grimmsnarl over it. And then the final Pokemon I decided to add, I needed something fast, I felt like, because the team was pretty slow for the most part. And I felt like I also still needed a more bulky water answer. So I ended up adding the Regieleki as my last Pokemon because it provided that speed control. Really did help out with the Fake Tears Meowstic plus the Regieleki for Fake Tears plus like big strong attacks from the Eleki, as well as just like the speed control of Electrode. I felt like it was fantastic. So that is how the 6 was formed. All right, let's go over the items, the movesets, and the EV sprites of the team. We have the Power Herb Rayquaza with Airlock for the ability with Air Slash, Draco Meteor, Meteor Beam, and Protect. So I felt like overall, Rayquaza is a really cool Pokemon with the Airlock ability. It's pretty good against some teams. Again, really hard to build around, but I feel like it does have a niche in the format, and I think it is pretty strong when it faces the Sun team. So I chose the Power Herb set because I felt like, it's an interesting set. I tried the Sword Stance physical set. Dragon Stance is really strong, but I felt like I want to try something else, and I've seen the Meteor Beam sets, and I felt like, ooh, I kind of want to try that, especially with like Fake Tears pressure. I think it could go really a long way. So I tried the Power Up set, Meteor Beam for Charizard as well. It was really nice for So I did try it out, and yeah, it was ending up pretty solid. So Air Slash, Meteor Beam, Draco Meteor, and Protect. Now, of course, you want the flying move for the max airstream. I don't like Hurricane. I really don't like Hurricane if you don't have a rain team. It doesn't matter if I would have rain because I have airlock for the ability anyway. Meteor Beam I think is really nice, of course, for the +1 special attack. Draco Meteor I think is like a really strong move on Rayquaza. It helps out against like Eternatus. Dishes out a lot of damage. The max dragons can be really nice. And then Protect. Now, I really wanted Earth Power somewhere in this set, but I feel like I couldn't really fit it in. I really want Protect because, again, Rayquaza is a glass cannon. It hits pretty hard, but it's not the bulkiest restricted out there. Even with the screens, it's not exactly a superb bulky Pokemon. So I felt like I needed the entire moveset, and I felt like it was more valuable than Earth Power. I really want to fit it in, though, because the Zacians, like catching a Zacian to switch with Earth Power would be really nice. But I decided, you know what? I think this is a more consistent set. And if I really do feel like I'm struggling against Zacians, then I'll add Earth Power to the team. And I felt like I had some moments where I really wanted to get Earth Power off into Zacian, but overall I felt like I was able to play well enough to where I didn't require it. So yeah, I felt like the set was just fine. Then for the EV spread, I felt like I went with pretty much a near max special attack, max speed set. The only difference was I felt like base 95, like there wasn't really much that changes. I guess your speed time of Kyurem in that case, but I would usually just go for Thunder Wave or Electro Up anyway for the most part, so I felt like that wasn't that big of a deal. So I was trying to figure out, and they're like super rare regardless, so I was trying to figure out what Pokemon do I really want to outspeed. I still underspeed like max speed or Shifu, so that's not exactly amazing, but not much I could do. And I was like, you know what, I think Kyogre is probably the biggest threat that I kind of want to outspeed, so I just ended up choosing a spread that outspeeds max speed Timid Kyogre. I would probably change the speed stat to up it by 1. I outspeed Jolly max speed Landis variant because I felt like maybe that's a Pokemon that can definitely be outsped. So I would probably bump up the number by 1, but otherwise I feel like overall the Rayquaza was pretty solid. I had 244 in special attack. I had 36 in the remaining with HP. Gave me an odd number. That only really matters if you're fighting like random Super Fang or Nature's Madness, so you have 51% HP remaining after the attack, which is just a habit mine. I've done it since like Gen 6 and Gen 7. It was pretty important. So that's just like a habit that I have. And then I just dumped the remaining into defense and special defense. And I took it out of special attack because I was like, you know, it gives me like 2 extra stat points. And with screens, I feel like it's pretty worth it in general. And since I have like the power boosting up and the fake tears, I don't think it's really going to matter that 1 special attack stat in the long term. So just having, I think, a bit more optimal in having 2 more stat points, I felt like was just better. So that's the Rayquaza set. I think it was pretty strong throughout my testing, and yeah, I really did enjoy using it. Next Pokemon we have is the Light Clay Meowstic with the Prankster ability with Fake Tears, Reflect, Light Screen, and Thunder Wave. I mean, Meowstic is a really cool Pokemon, especially if you have like multiple type overlappings when you have a Grimmsnarl. I think it's pretty solid. Now, there are a few downsides to using Meowstic, of course. You are more vulnerable to Darker Shifu, but of course, as I said before, that Darker Shifu was dropping usage when I was like using the Meowstic, so I felt like it wasn't that big of a deal. Of course, you're vulnerable to Shadow Rider Calyrex a bit more. I didn't think that was that big of a deal because I had like Incineroar. I had Dark Pulse on the Blastoise at the time. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. And when I had Fairform and I was having a Solvus bulky Pokemon under Light Screen and had Dark coverage, so I felt like overall it wasn't necessary to have the Grimmsnarl at all. And I felt like Meowstic did have some nice options, especially with like the moveset that I had, like Quick Guard. It had Rain Dance potential. It just had quite a few things like Charm. Like it had good moves, and I was testing quite a few of them when I was testing out the team, but I just ended up going with a solid, like just what I know, and it ended up working out really well. So I chose the Light Clay Meowstic with the Prankster ability, of course, very similar to Grimmsnarl, as you know. Fake Tears, Reflect, Light Screen, and Thunder Wave. And yeah, I really do like the Meowstic. Fake Tears, of course, for the support with Rayquaza plus Blastoise, and of course the Regieleki that was added to the team was absolutely fantastic for the damage output. Reflect and Light Screen to make myself really bulky. Thunder Wave, of course, for speed control. And the reason I had Thunder Wave was I didn't have Thunder Wave initially. I had like all the other testing. I was trying out like Psychic, I was trying out Rain Dance, I was trying out Quick Guard, and I was trying out like all these different moves. But I felt like speed control was really nice, especially against like a Zacian, because if I can pair them once, oh, that would be so big, I think, for the team. But also like Dragapult, I felt like was really difficult, and there were some other Pokemon like Eternatus, like just the dragon types in general, like Kyurem, was really something that I really didn't like facing. And I felt like Thunder Wave just helped my Rayquaza out, and Blastoise was able to handle them. So yeah, I ended up choosing Thunder Wave as the last move. And it's really nice because like with Grimmsnarl, you're pretty much going to want Spirit Break, and yeah, since I wasn't clicking Spirit Break at all with the team, I just felt like, you know, I have 4 support moves. I can go with Meowstic. And then the EV spread, I don't really know what this does. I just made a bulky Meowstic set, and this is basically what I ended up going for. I ended up going for max HP. I ended up going with Velocipede Def, and then I had Summon Physical Defense because, like, with Grimmsnarl, you kind of want more physical defense, of course, for like Zacians and stuff. But I had Intimidate. The Meowstic didn't really share any of the weaknesses that Grimmsnarl had, and it's just a generally bulky Pokemon with like very few weaknesses. So I felt like, you know, it's not really necessary to like have a big investment to one stat. So I'll just like kind of spread it out a bit. And I had like Intimidate, as I mentioned before, so I could invest a bit more in the special defense, which I felt like was just pretty solid. Now, I really did like Meowstic. I think it was a phenomenal Pokemon. The big downside of Meowstic, I felt like in general, was Prankster Taunt being vulnerable to that, like from Tornadus and the rare Whimsicott, but Whimsicott doesn't really run that, and I feel like Tornadus was a pretty rare Pokemon anyway. So I felt like, you know, it wasn't that big of a deal. I never really encountered that situation, but it is one downside of using Meowstic that it has to be addressed. And of course, there is like a few other stuff that, of course, with the typing, as I mentioned before, but I really didn't notice it with Meowstic, and I felt like it was just really nice not having to sack Grimmsnarl after Reflect, or like sack my screen user to get one Reflect up against a Zacian. I felt like it was pretty nice just getting both of my screens up and then threatening with Thunder Wave and Fake Tear support. I really did like that about Meowstic, and I really did think it was really solid on this team. Next Pokemon we have is the Citrus Berry Incineroar with Intimidate for the bid with Flare Blitz, Darkest Lariat, Parting Shot, Fake Out. Do I really have to explain Incineroar? Really good typing, Intimidate. It's just a really solid Pokemon. I think there's not much to say about Incineroar. I think we all know about Incineroar. I chose the Citrus Berry because I didn't really feel like I needed goggles on the team, because the airlock helps out against Venusaur, making it like Rayquaza being able to outspeed usually and really threaten the Venusaur. So I felt like it wasn't really necessary to have the safety goggles. So I like the general recovery. I like the Flare Blitz, Darkest Lariat, Parting Shot, Fake Out set because I really like Flare Blitz, of course, for the move. Darkest Lariat, of course, for the Ghost type in the Shadow Rider Calyrex. I like the Parting Shot, of course, and Fake Out. It's just a really solid Incineroar set. Like, I didn't really want an Assault Vest because I had Assault Vest on the Fairforn, so Citrus Berry was a pretty good set, and I just really enjoyed it. I also love Parting Shot, I think, on the team. I think it really helps out, make my team even more annoying to take down. So I had the Special Defensive Incineroar set. This is a pretty standard Incineroar set for taking on Xerneas, because you always live a Geomancy boosted Moonblast from a Timid Xerneas 100% of the time. I'm just very comfortable with this Incineroar set. It's something I've been using since like 2019. Just a really effective Incineroar set. I didn't really think I needed physical defense on the team because Blastoise is a pretty good physical defensive Pokemon. So was Fairforn. And I was usually switching in Incineroar against, like, you know, physical attacks, and usually I'd Reflect up anyway, or I'd be switching in for the special ape attacks. And I felt like just in general, Incineroar as a special defensive Pokemon is just where I'm most comfortable with. So ended up just going with a special defensive Incineroar. Not much else to say. Dumped the remaining to defense, and of course a little bit left over into attack and speed. Just a really solid Incineroar set. Not much else to say. So next up, we got the Life Orb Gmax Blastoise with the Torrent ability with Hydro Cannon, Blizzard, Yawn, and Protect. This Pokemon is an interesting Pokemon. I still am not sure about how I feel about Blastoise, but the bulky water, the Cannon damage is absolutely insane. And yeah, I just felt like it was a pretty good fit, I think, on this team. It really makes Zacian a little bit easier to handle because Blastoise is usually just able to eat up the attacks. The Cannon damage is just really nice, I felt like, for the team. And yeah, it's a pretty solid Pokemon, I feel like. And yeah, a Life Orb on the Blastoise. Now, I had a few different sets in mind. When I originally had the core, I had Assault Vest on the Blastoise. I had Dark Pulse. And then there was like this other shift where I was like, am I really doing enough damage? So I wasn't sure, so I just added the Life Orb instead. I felt like the damage output was just really nice. And yeah, I had Dark Pulse on the Blastoise originally, but I ended up changing it to Blizzard at the last moment. So I have the Hydro Cannon. I think that is the strongest for the max move, and I just felt like it was pretty good in general. I have Blizzard. Now, the reason I changed to Blizzard was just for the random Dragon types that were just really being a pain, especially like Eternatus, I felt like was pretty rough. I usually do prefer Dark Pulse most of the time because I feel like I'm never clicking Hailstorm usually into like a potential. For instance, I would never be targeting like Rillaboons with Blizzard, but I felt like maybe it was kind of worth it as a backup to Venusaur. So I felt like, you know what, I'll try out Blizzard. It helps out with the dragons, which are being a little bit annoying, I felt like, to the team. And even though I kind of missed Dark Pulse at times, like Blizzard actually did come in handy, so it ended up being useful. I have Yawn. Now, Yawn is an interesting move. I wasn't sure about the Blastoise having Yawn originally. I considered Shell Smash, but I felt like, you know, I felt like I was just never getting off the Shell Smash, and I was always kind of afraid to click it because even if I have screens up to help cover the Blastoise weaknesses, I felt like it was just too slow to really abuse it, and I really wanted a bulky Blastoise set than a fast one. So yeah, I just ended up going with the Yawn set. I felt like it was pretty nice. I could catch some Dynamaxes off guard. I also considered having Dark Pulse over the Yawn slot, but I felt like Yawn could just really come in handy during some of the matches I felt like I was playing, especially against passive stuff. So I really did like the Yawn option, I think, on this team, because there's some ways you can utilize it, especially to set up like a Rayquaza, which I think is really solid, or you could like try to pin a slot, which I think is really solid, and then of course protect to just preserve the Blastoise. So the EV spread, I went with 196 HP, which gives me a 179 HP stat. This is pretty much the closest you can get to max HP, where you are not taking like the maximum hit of Life Orb if you have like a 1 more in the HP stat, because it changes the HP number you take from the Life Orb recoil. So I felt like that was pretty nice. I really want offense, so I went with 196 modest. So that gives me a +1 in the stat point right there, and it was pretty much the maximum I would go for. Then the rest, I just decided, you know what, I'm gonna end up going into bulk. But let me think about the speed first. So I went with a 101 speed stat. I felt like that's pretty solid, you know, might help out with a few other like matchups in that specific speed tier, but I felt like just being able to outspeed base 130s potentially with like Thunder Wave from Meowstic, I felt like was pretty much solid. I could have went with more speed with like Electro combinations against like base 100s, but I felt like that investment just wasn't worth it. I really wanted a bulky Blastoise that was still doing a good amount of damage to the Life Orb. And yeah, so I ended up just investing more into special defense as I had Intimidate with Incineroar, and then giving a little bit more into the physical defense because of the screens and the Intimidate. I felt like having special defense was more valuable to me. So yeah, I really did enjoy the Gmax Blastoise set. I think it was really fun to use, and it really did the job that it needed to do. Next Pokemon we have is the Assault-Vest Ferrothorn with Iron Bars for DB with Power Up, Gyro Ball, Knockoff, and Bulldoze. I think offensive Ferrothorn is still pretty solid. It is a Pokemon that's hard to use because of like Incineroar pretty much everywhere. Charizard, of course, a little bit of a problem, but of course my team doesn't really have that big of a problem. I feel like with the weather, with Rayquaza, I felt like, you know, Ferrothorn's pretty solid, especially with the Blastoise usually helping out against like most Incineroar stuff. I felt like Ferrothorn was a pretty solid Pokemon. The Steel and Grass typing is really nice, and it was bulky. I didn't really want Kartana because of how frail its special defense was. Even with the screens, so I really did like having the Assault-Vest Ferrothorn to switch it into like the bulky water moves and just being able to dish out good amount of damage. So I really do like the Ferrothorn set. I think that the Iron Defense Leftover set, yes, it's annoying, but I feel like it is one-dimensional, and I really do just like having the move coverage that this Ferrothorn does have. Power Up, of course, for the bulky water types, especially that Kyogre, which can be troubling. The Gyro Ball helps us out against Xerneas and like just does a good amount of damage in general. Knockoff I really like for Calyrex and being able to knock off stuff like P2, which is really solid. I think I really did like Knockoff. And the last move, I was trying to think about what do I want on the Ferrothorn set now. I could have had Seed Bomb for a more accurate grass move. I thought about Body Press, but I felt like I wasn't going to click Steel Spike most of the time, so like not really that big of a deal. I don't even need to catch Incineroars on the Switch most of the time, because I could always pivot to Incineroar, Blastoise, or Rayquaza most of the time, and they'll take care of the Incineroar. So I'm like, yeah, I don't really need Body Press. What do I really need? And then I thought about it, and I'm like, you know, Bulldoze is probably a really solid move because it gives me another form of speed control, and it can really work with Rayquaza potentially. So, and Max Quake, if I do have to Dynamax Ferrothorn, was a pretty okay option. So I was like, you know what, I'll put Bulldoze on the Ferrothorn and see how it went. And I felt like Bulldoze was a nice move to have just as that option I really did like. Then the E spread is just very simple. I felt like max HP I think is pretty solid, of course. Then the 204 attack stat and 52 in defense. So I really like this Ferrothorn set. It's a pretty standard one. This was back like in 2014 based off like Ray Rizzo's 2014 regional team. I think that Assault-Vest Ferrothorn is just really solid, and I've been using it for most of the time. I mean, it was originally designed as a Power Up always KOs a bulky Rotom Wash, so the Power Up can pretty much always like take on the Kyogres in general. I think it's just really solid. Of course, I did change the special defense around, but I felt like with Light Screen I didn't really need to have all of it into special defense, and like, you know, maybe just in case I fight like a Dark Archifus, having the little bit of defense just allows me to take on the move better. So I ended up moving the stats into the physical defense, and yeah, I think it's a really solid Pokemon. I think Ferrothorn did its job. It was like a pain for some of my opponents to handle, and yeah, it was just able to dish out a good amount of damage. Last Pokemon we have, pretty standard Regieleki with the Magnet, with Transistor for the bit, with Thunderbolt, Volt Switch, Electro, Protect. Pretty standard Regieleki, not much else to say. A good Pokemon against bulky waters, really nice for the speed control, a fast mode for the team because this team kind of plays slowly for the most part, has the Thunderwave speed control, but can struggle otherwise. So I really do like having this backup answer with the Regieleki with the Electro Pressure, and again another answer to bulky waters like Feeny, which can give me a bit of trouble. So I really do like having the Regieleki. Magnet, of course, to power up its electric type moves. Thunderbolt, Volt Switch, Electro, Protect. Do I really have to explain Regieleki? It's just a really strong option here. Didn't really like Hyper Beam since I just don't feel like I'm usually clicking Hyper Beam. I prefer the 3 electric attacks. And I feel like, yes, if I'm maxing Eleki, I'll probably just be going for electric moves most of the time. I'd rather click the electric moves than again with Hyper Beam on the Landorus, which, you know, could be a thing, but with Blastoise, I felt like I'd probably be Dynamaxing Blastoise in that situation anyway. So having the Volt Switch is really nice for pivoting as well. So, and Electro Web, of course, for speed control, and I do want Protect on the Eleki. So pretty standard, max speed, max special attack, 4 defense. Eleki just really strong, hits hard, allows me to get some speed control. Not much else to say. It's a really ridiculous Pokemon in this format, and just hits hard and pretty much just damages with the team. Volt switches around, pretty solid mon. So how do you play with the team, and what are the common leads with the team? So I feel like this team is pretty straightforward. There's a lot of different options, especially with the Meowstic, where you could go with like a Fake Tears offensive mode right off the bat to pick up some quick knockouts, or just prepare for a longer game by getting the screens up and slowing down your opponent's team with Thunder Wave to help support the Pokemon in the back. Generally, this team has like quite a few different ways you could play with it as well. You could go with like an offensive mode right out the bat. You could play defensive. There's a lot of different tools on the team, and it's really just about setting up for a win condition. Usually trying to weaken Pokemon, I feel like with the Canate's a pretty solid option, or just trying to pick up quick knockouts in general, I feel like is really solid. The common leads I would say with the team, I think Meowstic's a very common lead on this team, especially with like any of the special attackers. It's really solid because you could set up the screens immediately. You could go for the Fake Tears, or you could go for Thunder Wave right away. I think it's a really strong option. Meowstic plus Rayquaza, Meowstic plus Blastoise, Meowstic plus Regieleki, they're all really solid offensive options. Or you could go with like a defensive option with Meowstic with like Incineroar, for instance, with the Intimidate Fake Out to set up the screens right away, and then Parting Shot out to get in like a free switch in and prepare the Thunder Wave and Fake Tears pressure afterward. Then other leads, I would say you just have a lot of flexible leads. Of course, Incineroar is just really solid, of course, with the Fake Out, the Intimidate, Parting Shot out. You could pretty much pair it with anything, I think, on this team. Like, you could really pair any member with any member and it'll do pretty well. Like Eleki and Incineroar, of course, a fantastic lead. Eleki plus like Rayquaza or Blastoise for speed control, as well as like fast pressure. It's just anything can really lead. I think there's so many different flexible leads. I'd say the main ones you're probably going to lead are going to be like a combination of Meowstic with something, or Incineroar or something, but there's also like Regieleki, of course, that's really solid as well. And I think there's just so many different options. It really just depends on the team you're facing, but there's like a lot of different ways you could play with the team according to, do you want to set up for a early sweep, or do you want to like prepare for like a slower game? And that is the show. I hope you all enjoyed the thought process of what went behind the Rayquaza team. If you did, be sure to leave a like down below and leave a comment down below. It really does help me out, and let me know if you do enjoy the team builders. Really just let me know in the comments down below what I could improve on as well. Let me know in the comments down below. But if you do enjoy the team, make sure you check it out with the rental code. You have 2 weeks to grab it before it expires, but the payment is always available in the description down below. But thank you all for tuning in. Have a great day, people, and until we bow again, I'll catch y'all later.